Welcome to Madlik. My name is Geoffrey Stern, and at Madlik we light a spark or shed some light on a Jewish text or tradition. Along with Rabbi Mintz, we host Madlik Disruptive Torah on Clubhouse every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern and share it as the Madlik podcast on your favorite platform. The Book of Deuteronomy, also known as Mishna Torah or the Reviewed Torah, is drawing to an end and provides us with an opportunity to review some of the Rabbinic Principles that have guided us over the past few years in our reading of the 5 books of Moses. Starting with the iconic statement that the Torah is not in heaven, we realize how the rabbis began a process of humanizing, maybe even secularizing the Torah in a very radical way. Almost as though they took the Torah from heaven. With no apologies to Abbie Hoffman, join us for Steal This Book. Well, welcome back to Madlik, and it's great to have you as the year comes to an end, which means that our cycle of reading the Parshiot comes to an end as well. And as I said, we are now in Deuteronomy 30, and starting to look because we've been doing this so long at what we talk about in previous years. And last year, we spent a lot of time on this amazing piece of Talmud where the punchline was, you can't listen to voices that come down from heaven because guess what? It says in our Parsha, the Torah is not in the heavens. And so it's very rare that we talk about the same verse 2 years in a row, but we are going to go, as I said in the intro, in a totally different direction. We're going to take a hint from Mishna Torah, which is a review of the whole Torah, and we're going to kind of review how we at Madlik actually study the Torah, what principles guide us, and maybe what the rabbis taught us about how we should learn Torah. So let's dive right in. Deuteronomy 30:11 says, "Surely this instruction which I enjoin you this day is not too baffling for you, nor it is beyond your reach. It is not in the heavens, lo hashamayim he, that you should say, who among us can go up to the heavens and get it for us, and impart it to us, that we may observe it. Neither is it beyond the sea, that you should say, who among us can cross to the other side of the sea, and get it for us, and impart it to us, that we may observe it. No, the thing is very close to you, in your mouth, in your heart, to observe it." So this sense that we read, and if we read it in context, Rabbi, I think you gotta believe that when it says it's not in the heavens, it's not in the heavens in the same way that it's not far away in the sea. It's almost a physical, it's not too far away. It's not physically beyond reach. I once had a child who met with his guide and counselor at high school, and every time he mentioned a school he wanted to go to, she said, "Nah, that would be a reach." What we're saying is that the Torah is within reach. Isn't that the simple meaning of the text here?
That is the simple meaning. And that's a good meaning, by the way. That's a nice meaning. The Torah is within reach.
Well,
now we have to figure out what that means. What does it mean the Torah is within reach? Right? What's the significance of it being within reach? Why would we think it's not within reach? Does that mean that the laws are within reach? Does that mean that the moral lessons are within reach? What would we think? And I think what we might think is the Torah is divine. The Torah is heavenly. Man can't live up to the Torah. The answer is no, we can live up to the Torah. That's a good message, I think. That's a really good message for the end of the Torah.
I think it's a great message. I think the verse itself, and this is before we're going to go to the commentaries, because trust me, the commentaries go in many other different metaphorical directions, but it ends by saying, "Beficha ubilevavcha la'asoto." It is in your mouth and in your heart to observe it. It's almost saying that the spirituality, the religiosity, the moral, the ethics of the Torah are not some sort of natural law. It's almost ingrained within us. That would be if I read the verses in context. I would also say not only is it not physically far from us, but it's not an artificial edifice. It's not something imposed on us. It's something that is ingrained in us, whether because we're Jews and we went through this history and therefore eating matzah is very natural for us, or as human beings, that what I'm asking you to do is to be true to yourselves.
Yeah, I mean, that is really interesting, that it's not artificial. It's accessible, it's real, and therefore we have to take it seriously. That maybe there's an inclination to look at the Torah as kind of a fable. The whole thing's a fable. It tells stories. It tells about a people who observe the law, but it's not real. And what the Torah is saying is, no, it's real. You'll like that. That makes good sense. I like that a lot.
I do like that. So we always go to Rashi first. Rashi says, it is not in heaven, for were it in heaven, it would still be your duty to go up after it and to learn it. So he already it's not a metaphor for Rashi, but it's so easy. It's like you've been fed it with a silver spoon. There are other people that to get this message would have to convert. They would have to move from far away. But talking to the Jewish people, Moses is saying, my God, you've been given this great gift. It's right there sitting in your lap. I think that's his kind of message.
Yeah, good. I think that's right. I think that, and that's nice. I mean, and kind of that's what the text means. It's not it's not what we would call a stretch, and that's always what Rashi does.
Yep. So in Eruvin, it says, Rava says it is not in heaven, means that it's not someone found in someone who raises his mind over it like the heavens, nor it is found in the sea, someone who expands his mind over it like the sea. So, he's talking different types of intellectuals. There are some intellectuals that will look at it and look down upon it. There are others that are generalists, maybe. Interesting that he says it. Interesting that he feels he needs to say it. Rabbi Yochanan said, it is not in heaven, not to be found in the haughty, nor is it beyond the sea. It is not to be found merchants or traders. Of course, sea was the highway, was the railroad, was the channel of commerce in the old world. It's interesting how everyone needs to find a kind of a metaphorical explanation for this.
Because it is itself a metaphor. Lo bashamayim he is not literal, because the Torah is not in heaven. The Torah is written on the scroll that we read in shul every single Shabbat morning. So it begs for a metaphoric kind of explanation, doesn't it?
Well, it does, but I think you raise an interesting point, because I would argue that Shamayim in the Bible that we're going to start all over again in about a month is, and on whatever day it was, God created the heavens and the earth. And Shemayim means what NASA's involved with, and Mayim is what the Navy's involved with. There is no theological implications, I believe, when the Bible, if you take it at face value, talks about the heavens. Maybe the Torah was given from the heavens because there was lightning and thunder, and it was given from above. But I think I wouldn't say it's a modern concept of this heaven, in terms of the firmament, in terms of the sky. But I would say that the simple reading of the text doesn't even imply where Shemayim is this kind of Western concept or later concept of a heaven, a spiritual, otherworldly abode. Do you think I have a leg to stand on here?
That's interesting. What shamayim means, lo bashamayim. You see, just take your comment a step back And really, lo bashamayim, where else could it be? It's not in heaven. It's not in, it's not far away. Why do they say it's not in heaven? Why don't they just say it's not far away? That's really the question you're trying to answer.
Well, they does say it. It says it's not in heaven. It's not beyond the other side of the sea. I mean, really, it's
right.
Yeah.
But why is it so dramatic? Why doesn't it just say it's not far?
Got it. Okay. So you're saying that this whole metaphor love fest is created by the fact that it could have been much more straightforward. It's not far away from you. It's right in your lap. So you have no excuses. Do it.
Something like that.
Something like that.
That's what I think.
So the Rabbeinu Bachaya says as follows: it is not in heaven. It is possible that the reason Moses made this point is because prior to bringing the Torah to the people, it had indeed resided in the heaven, and we have quoted arguments offered by the angels opposing its descent to earth. So those of you who are listeners of Madlik, and I actually went on another Clubhouse this week, and we got into a whole discussion. We remembered the Midrash that said when the angels saw Moses getting the Torah, they said, why is he getting the Torah? We should have it. And Moses replied, do you have to provide for your family, that you are might steal something? Do you have to engage in commerce, that you have to make sure that your scales are properly calibrated? This concept, which is what Rabbeinu Bachaya is referring to, is this kind of sense of man somehow taking this otherworldly Torah, not something that was without controversy. I mean, I said, I called this podcast Steal This Book. And, that was, there was a radical at Columbia, part of the Weatherman, called Abbie Hoffman. And when he finally wrote a book about his stuff and put it up for sale for $7.95, the title was Steal This Book. In other words, don't pay for it, steal it. He was so against the authorities. But, I'm thinking of the Greek myth of Prometheus, for instance. Prometheus is best known for defying the gods by stealing fire from them and giving it to humanity in the form of technology, knowledge. He's generally seen as the author of the human arts and sciences. In other theologies, in mythologies, there is this concept that somehow mankind got access to a higher intelligence. And I think that midrash that the Rabbeinu Bachaya is referring to is as close as we get. Maybe you know others where maybe we didn't steal the book, but we certainly somehow convinced God to give us this Torah that the angels wanted to keep for themselves. And there is this sense when it says, Lo bashamayim he, that you guys got it. Mankind has gotten the Torah.
This is famous, that God went to all the other nations and offered the Torah, that somehow the angels wanted the Torah. This idea that there was a competition for the Torah and the Jews won it is a midrashic concept. Now, I think it's fair to ask what it means, what its significance is. I think that's a fair question, but that is something that we're familiar with. So let's take each one of them separately. One is that the Jews got it and the other nations didn't get it. It's a sense that they had their chance and they gave it up. They can't complain later to say that, why didn't we get a chance to have the Torah? You had a chance. But, you couldn't handle do not commit murder, or you couldn't handle do not commit adultery. So therefore, we got the Torah. But the angels is something else. The angels is about what the Torah is. It's kind of related to Lo Bashamayim. The Torah is not for angels. The Torah is for human beings. The Torah appreciates human beings. It understands what human beings are, and it's written for human beings. It's not written for angels.
So now, of course, we segue into what we discussed last year, which is this iconic piece of Talmud, which rabbis are having an argument, and one rabbi named Rabbi Yeshua is saying, I'm right, let the walls of the study hall prove it, and the walls of the study hall move, and the river prove it, and the river goes backwards, and finally says, let the heavens prove it. And a bat kol, a voice, comes down from heaven and says, what do you want from Rabbi Yeshua? He's right. And Rabbi Yirmiyah says, the Torah was already given at Mount Sinai. We do not regard a divine voice. As you already wrote Mount Sinai in the Torah. So he first quotes our verse. He says, Shkva nitna Torah, lo b'shamayim hi. And then he quotes a verse in Exodus which says, after the majority we incline. So there are 4 rabbis against you. We don't listen to voices from heaven because the Torah has been given to man. And we go after the majority. So what I said in the introduction is what I'd like to pursue a little bit now. This concept of the Torah was given to man, whether we stole it like Prometheus, or we convinced the angels and God that it was ours. Ultimately, this Torah, by the way the rabbis interpreted this verse, was given to man. And it might very well be that they reinterpreted the verse, that was not the initial meaning. But that's what Rabbinic Judaism gave to us. And then they quote a second principle that guides us when we study Torah, and that is, after the majority, we incline, which is acharei rabim lahatot. But what's fascinating about that verse is they might have reinterpreted the verse, lo b'shamayim hi, it's not in the heavens, but in the case of after the majority you shall go, they didn't reinterpret it, they went against the actual meaning of the verse. In Exodus 32, it says, you shall neither side with the mighty to do wrong, you shall not give perverse testimony to pervert it. It says, acharei, where is the verse that I want? You acharei l'rabim lahatot, you should not go after the majority for bad. And here the rabbis take it as, you shall go after the majority. And so they prove their own point. They prove the point that the Torah is no longer in heaven and that we have been given the authority, you can say also the responsibility, to interpret it. Is that radical or not?
No, I think that's great. And I think the most important thing to remember here is, and it always gets a little tricky, the Torah is the divine Torah. But the interpretation is the rabbinic interpretation. And the rabbis were very sophisticated. So what the rabbis do is they interpret the Torah so it will support their authority. That's what the story about the walls of the Beit Midrash falling are about. It's about rabbinic authority. Lo b'shamayim means I don't care what the heavenly voice says. We have to follow the majority. Lo b'shamayim hi. God doesn't determine things. Now, obviously, that's an exaggeration of what the phrase means because we don't usually have heavenly voices. But that is the perfect example of the rabbis interpreting the Torah to support the rabbis. You see how that works? It works forward and backwards.
It does, but you can't get away from the democratization of the Torah. When the rabbis say you follow the majority, you can say it's a majority of rabbis. You can say it's a majority of the people.
That's the rabbinic interpretation is you follow the majority against God. You have to say that last piece, against God.
Well, you're the rabbi. You said it,
Right? Against God.
Good.
So, but what's interesting, what I'm so excited about is that that's not explicit in the Torah.
Absolutely.
That's what's so strange.
And it
or
does...
strange or interesting, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and radical. I'd say it's radical.
Right.
This is a very radical piece of Talmud. But, it does find its place. It's not only the majority of the rabbis. There is a concept of tircha de tzibor, that if the rabbis make a decree that is too tough on the people, you know what? The people win. So democratization is, to me, the second rule. If we're kind of making a list of rules of interpretation, and the first one is that the Torah was given to man, and it's our obligation and responsibility, privilege and liberty to reinterpret. The second is that we're all in this together. There's a democratic aspect of it, and it could be our elected leaders, it could be our rabbis, and it could be all of us. The next law that I would like to say that has guided us as we're reviewing these rules is in Deuteronomy 4:6. It says, "Observe them faithfully, for that will be proof of your wisdom and discernment to other peoples, who on hearing all of these laws will say, surely that great nation is a wise and discerning people. Ki hi chachmatchem ubinatchem le'enei ha'amim." I owe Ethan Tucker thanks for teaching this verse. It was from a rabbi called Rav Shmuel Glasner, the Dor Revi'i. And he basically argued that our ethics and our morality have to stand up to the rules and the laws of critical analysis. Because if not, we will not be somebody who is admired by the nations. I went to a yeshiva once on Mitzpeh Ramon. Mitzpeh Ramon is as close to the Grand Canyon in Israel as you will get. And the rabbi first met me in his office, and he said, "Now let's go to our real office." And he took me to the edge of Mitzpeh Ramon, this Grand Canyon, and there were some yeshiva students, black hats, white shirts, tzitzis flowing. He said, "Ask them how this canyon was created." And I went to them and I said, "How was it created?" And they start talking about millions of years there were plates in the earth, and my mind like dulled, and I'm walking away with the rabbi, and I said, "What's with the plates in the million years? This is a yeshiva. What happened to 6 days, 7 days of creation?" And he basically told me that God not only created a world, but he created our minds. And if we do not listen to our minds, we are breaking the law as much as any other law written in the Torah. And that just blew my mind. But it does talk to the fact that the rabbis assimilated rules of logic. If you read an Orthodox Siddur every morning after you say the blessing on studying Torah, you discuss Rabbi Yishmael's 13 principles of hermeneutics. And he has these rules of interpreting the Torah. And Saul Lieberman says he probably got this concept of you need rules to decipher and parse a literary text from the Greeks or for the Romans. But here it was these rabbis who have never, absolutely never, put their heads in the soil and disregarded scientific knowledge. I would consider that my third rule.
I think that's good. I like that a lot. I mean, first of all, let's just take it back. That's a good story. It's a good story that the yeshiva bacher, embraces science. And it's sometimes, they have to recognize that science is not against the Torah. Now, that's an interesting discussion from whenever we have it. And that is, how can it be? How can it be that science doesn't contradict the Torah? How can it be that these plates, separated and created mitzpeh, Rimon, and that be right, and the story of creation also be right? That's all interesting. But God created our ability to embrace both of those traditions as being true.
Agreed. There shouldn't be a conflict. So again, this is a review session of the rules that guide us as we study the Torah. The fourth rule, I would say, and we have quoted this many times, is Ein Mukdam Umuchar Torah, that there is no early or late in the Torah, which means that there is no chronology. This is not a book of history. We talked about Zachor and Yosef Chaim Yerushalmi saying that the Jews, if Herodotus invented history, Jews invented meaning in history. And again, it's understanding what the rabbis, what the Torah itself was looking to do. It wasn't to record history as it was. It was recording history as a lesson, and that has to be a rule when we study the Torah that we got from our rabbis.
Good. So that is another important rule. The fact that the Torah is not a history book. It doesn't mean that the Torah doesn't have history. By the way, every religion has a book of its history. It has to, because if not, you don't know where it comes from. You know, Christianity is an interesting religion. We'll just talk about this for 1 second. Christianity is an interesting religion because Christianity needs the Torah. It needs the Old Testament. Because if there's no Old Testament, then you can't explain where Jesus came from because Jesus was a Jew. Right? So that's why the Christians believe that the Jews killed Jesus. But the Christians don't wipe out the Jews. You know why they don't wipe out the Jews? Because if there are no Jews, then you can't explain where Christianity came from. If there are no Jews, what's the story of the Christians? The Christians need the Jews. So everybody needs a book that tells their story. So it's not a history book that's bound by chronology. It's not a history book, but it's a book of memory, like Yosef Chaim Yerushalmi said. But it does tell our story, and that's a very important story. Just to relate it to Rosh Hashanah, because we have to pull everything back to the holiday, it's interesting when it comes to Rosh Hashanah that Rosh Hashanah does not commemorate a historical event in the Torah. In tradition, we say that Rosh Hashanah is the day of creation, but the Torah doesn't say that. Most holidays commemorate a historical event. Pesach commemorates the Exodus, and Shavuot commemorates the Day of the Torah, and Sukkot commemorates the 40 years in the desert. Every holiday commemorates a historical event. So it's not a book of history, but the history part of it is significant.
Absolutely. And anyone who's seen these New Testaments that are every verse that kind of shows a prophecy from the Old Testament is in red understands that. It's a great segue to the next rule, which is a kind of a parallel to the rule I just mentioned, which is Ma'aseh Avot Siman Labanim, which is the stories of our forefathers. Most of the time it's referred to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but I would suggest it really refers to all of the history in the Bible is a simman, coming from the word symbolism, is a symbol for us. So the rabbis themselves, this is not a modern concept, were the first to say that the book of the Bible is there to learn lessons from, to draw ethical and moral teachings, to guide us in making decisions going forward, but it's not necessarily a book of history. We're running out of time, and I don't want to miss all the rules as we're reviewing in this Mishna Torah type of modality. The next one is Dibrat Torah B'Lashon B'nei Adam, that the Torah speaks in the language of man. And it's interesting that Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote a book in Hebrew. Most of his books were written in English. His book in Hebrew was Torah Min HaShamayim Ba'aspaklaria Shel HaDorot. It was translated by Gordon Tucker, called Heavenly Torah. And if you have time to read a 600-page book, this is a great place to go. But Gordon Tucker points out that whereas other books on Judaism begin with God, not only is his title basically a play on our verse, it's Torah Min HaShamayim, the heavenly Torah in the view of the generations. It's really a commentary, a 600-page commentary on the verse that we started. But his second chapter begins not with talking about God, but talking about the language of the Torah is in human language. It's written written for us as humans, whether it was written by humans inspired by God, whether it was written by God. We are entitled to look at it, to decipher it, to study it, and to learn from it as Belashon B'nai Adam. And I think that really almost, that last rule almost completes the circle of saying that the Torah is not in heaven. All of these rules relate to how the Torah is ours, and I think for my lesson that relates to the high holidays, by claiming that God is king, that Hashem Melech, Hashem Molech, Hashem Yimloch Li'olam V'ed, what we are saying is a radical concept that there are no earthly kings, there are no powers that control us, and we're also saying that the obligation is that the world was created for us, that our Torah was given for us. That's where the obligation comes from, that God gave us this Torah, and it's for us and this world, it's for us to make and remake and interpret and empower us. So I think that's kind of an amazing way to look at the way over the past 2-3 years we've kind of looked at the Torah and what it means for us.
It's a great way to end before Rosh Hashanah. Wishing everybody a Shabbat Shalom, a Shana Tova, a Chag Sameach, and we look forward to seeing you all next week when we will talk about Vayelech, the shortest parsha in the Torah. Shabbat Shalom, Shana Tova, Geoffrey.
Shana Tova, Rabbi. Thanks as always for being a part of this discussion, and thank you all for joining.
Rabbi, this is a wonderful session. I'm a little confused about the two issues of free will and fear of God. Those are mentioned consistently within Deuteronomy, so much so that one might interpret the language of this particular part of the Torah as if you don't do something, then you'll be punished. And yet, we're talking about rabbinical versus divine here. So could you sort of maybe just briefly discuss that? Why does free will, which comes forth in earlier and now fear, why is that so underscored?
So the first issue of divine providence, divine pre-knowledge of everything, that we did discuss in a prior session where the rabbi said something very, very radical. They said, Hakol biyadei shemayim chutz miyirat shemayim, which means that God has control of everything except fear of heaven. And so in a sense, it's almost as though, and the philosophers have to jump in, and the philosophers have to say, well, if somebody knows what you're going to do before you do it, do you still have free will in doing it? If an economist says that my guess is in the fourth quarter, people are going to buy less, does that mean that they are controlling people to buy less, or they're making a prediction that's based on a lot of data and it turns out to be true? I don't want to get into that part of it, but I think from the rabbinical point of view, the statement that everything is in the hands of God except fear of God, that ultimately they squared the circle and they said that God might know everything, but trust me, you still make your own decisions. That to me is, and we spent today's session talking about rabbinic interpretation, rabbinic Judaism, which at the end of the day, let's face it, our Judaism is rabbinic Judaism. The other question that you had about fear, Yirat Shemayim can be interpreted in many ways. I think we all have to take our own interpretation. Heschel's interpretation verged on wonder, on radical amazement, was Yirah. Charedim, the word Charedi that we talk about when we talk about ultra-Orthodox Jews is trembling in front of God. I think that, we moderns don't like this concept of fear. we would much prefer to think in terms of wonder, radical amazement. But at the end of the day, if you're in Puerto Rico and there is a tornado coming, if there's a hurricane coming, at a certain point in time, your wonder turns to fear. And I think the concept, to me anyway, and I can only talk personally, is, we humans have evolved. We know a lot, but there's things beyond our control. And fear is a human emotion that we cannot ignore. It's there. And when it comes to spirituality and God and all that, maybe we love to, I love personally to feel very at home in a synagogue, and I feel less that concept of coming into that holy place and taking off my shoes because I should be trembling. But I also respect that response and reflex. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I do believe that we can't deny or ignore that there is fear in the world, and that fear is a human emotion, and therefore it has a place when we come into contact with danger, but it also comes maybe into place when we come into contact with something that's bigger than us, that's unknown.
Thank you very much. I'll really study that. Interesting explanation. Thank you.
Well, Shana Tova, Lauren, it's been great having you, and I wish you all the best for the year to come. Thank you all for joining us, and have a great year.